I definitely want to talk to our next guest about the indictment of New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who vows to fight the forthcoming charges against him, even as some on the left are already throwing him under the bus, AOC and others saying he should resign straight away. One wonders what they have in mind, possibly the person that would take over as acting mayor, this Jumaane Williams, who is more of their ilk than is Eric Adams.
Yeah, he released a statement last night from his office about,
this
is all a bunch of lies.
My fellow New Yorkers, it is now my belief that the federal government intends.
Yeah, right. The pro forma statement. He's being targeted for elimination unfairly. He's going to fight the charges, and he's completely innocent. Okay, fine, maybe.
He's a victim in this.
We'll see. But more important to the country than Eric Adams' fate is the FBI's conduct. And so the weaponization of government subcommittee hearing yesterday featuring whistleblower Marcus Allen, among others. Marcus Allen, who's an operations specialist at the FBI, talked about basically 2 years that he was held in purgatory by the FBI, professional and financial, for daring to challenge the leadership's posture on things like J6. How many confidential informants were on the mall that day? Christopher Wray has no idea. Marcus Allen wanted to know. And for asking impertinent questions like that, his career came to a abrupt end at FBI. He had described his last act of public service at the hearing, offering this threat assessment and making these recommendations for Americans. Pretty somber.
I would just say that I consider the hearing today my last act of service as a public servant for the United States of America. And I'll give you my professional opinion. I was an intel professional for our country for many years, and I would give recommendations, and I'd also look at indications and warnings. So I would offer this to the American people as my warning to them. Since this is a warning to the American people, I say, I personally have no confidence that the FBI will rein in its own conduct. I've been persecuted along with Garrett, Steve and Kyle, and countless other whistleblowers. It is my opinion that the Bureau used reprisal and fear to control the workforce. It has been a seemingly effective tactic. I personally believe that there are no current effective checks and balances against them conducting lawless action with any type of correction in a legitimate time frame. I welcome the work of the IG, but I think any type of lawless action, there's no legitimate time frame to rein them back in. Their ability to overclassify information can allow them to stonewall forever. To the American people, you have a duty as a citizen to vote, and I strongly urge you to do so. It's how you participate in the American experience. I know people have doubts about election integrity, but you must vote. It is your claim. Stake your claim and don't forfeit it willingly. Have your voice heard. My other recommendations are in the natural order. First, vote. The second is the Second Amendment. Arm yourself and know how to defend yourself. Make 3 to 4 friends in your neighborhood and promise to come to each other's mutual aid in times of hardship. And during the Great Depression, people stocked up a pantry. So I think that's a good practice, especially in our economic times, and make sure you have 3 to 4 months of food. And as a person of faith, I'd say pray the rosary. Go to the First Friday devotions. That's for everybody, all my brothers and sisters of all faiths, and I know I'm Catholic. And read the gospel of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and live it every day.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined again by James Gagliano, retired FBI supervisory special agent and a doctoral candidate in Homeland Security at St. John's. Don't call him the Redman. Don't do it. He also serves as mayor of the village of Cornwall-on-Hudson, New York, and he's on the board of directors of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. James, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, it's always good to join you guys. How's everything in Chicago?
Well, it's chaotic and catastrophic as per usual. The comments of Marcus Allen, how do you respond?
So I don't know any of the gentlemen that that are considered whistleblowers. I didn't know any of them personally. They were a generation behind me at the FBI. I will say this about Mr. Allen. I thought his testimony was sober. I thought his testimony was respectful. I thought his testimony was pointed. And of all those, you're talking about Garrett O'Boyle and Kyle Seraphin and Steve Friend. Mr. Allen is the one that, of all the reading that I've done about this, all of the watching these hearings and listening to what these folks are doing on social media, I have the greatest amount of respect for. I think he made a clarion call. I thought that his exchange with Mr. Connolly and what Mr. Horowitz, the DOJ's Inspector General, said about the case are righteous. And I'll just close with this on it. The FBI and the federal government have to change this. When somebody is suspended and you automatically remove their security clearance and you allow them not, or you prohibit them from seeking outside employ, you can essentially bankrupt somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, especially agents that are working in big cities like Chicago or New York with inflation and the cost of living. It is an unfair and unjust process, Dan.
But he was out, and held in indefinite limbo for 27 months. I mean, it's not like he was suspended for a month or 2 months. 27 months, that's a long time.
It is, and he had to dip into his retirement savings, which, the 401k that you put your own money into, and that's your, part of your pension when you leave, because you're not going to get rich. You're not a professional athlete. You're not a celebrity, and the money that you make in the FBI, you're saving that, and for them to have to be subjected to that, him and his family, it's unconscionable. It's not righteous, and I'm gonna make a prediction here that he's going to win a lawsuit against the FBI and DOJ over this.
Well, he already reached a settlement.
Why such a draconian reaction from the FBI? What is the great threat that he posed to the agency? What is the great wrong that he committed?
Well, remember, if we go back in the case, I mean, he had questioned, the activities on January 6th, and I guess he was accused of coming up with conspiratorial theories and things like that. Well, I mean, you can go back to COVID and the conspiratorial theories that turned out to be righteous.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at a lot of issues and say, you need to test power, and that he was an intel analyst, and his job is to provide intelligence and analysis of same to the FBI agents who are, conducting investigations. You've got to paint the full picture, and to suggest that, well, if you ask these questions or you suppose or presuppose something and say this is a possibility, what about this? And then you end up getting suspended for it. I think it's inappropriate, and it's intimidation, and it does show, at least it gives the hint of impropriety, or that there are some in FBI leadership that have their fingers on the scale or are doing things to prejudice investigations.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want in an investigative body is groupthink. You don't want anybody asking any impertinent questions or thinking outside of the proverbial box. I mean, what do we talk? And also, too, by the way, he's brought up some other issues too that were all sort of weaved in, but the overclassification of information to prevent disclosure. To illegitimately prevent disclosure, and you get into these conversations where, why is that classified? I can't tell you because it's classified. All of that business, all of the artifice that's used by people like Christopher Wray to not comply or to not provide any information, legitimate answers to legitimate questions, and so he basically, I think he got punished for essentially exposing that the emperor had no clothes.
Well, what you just described is confirmation bias, Dan, and that is something that has infected many bureaucracies, and the FBI is obviously a bureaucracy. It's the middle name of our agency, Bureau. So confirmation bias is what happened during the Russian collusion investigation. It's where Director Comey, who was the director at the time, and a young group of callow, inexperienced agents that have been plucked from the field, hadn't been in the field for too long, were brought back to FBI headquarters. They marinated in the culture there for a little while and then sat around a table. One person suggested that this was what it was. They looked at the former president as a colossal threat to democracy, as has been said by, partisans on the left. And what they did was they chased that, even though there were so many things that literally you had to, suspend disbelief, that were so ridiculous. The Russian prostitutes, urinating on the former on the presidential candidate, things like that. You had to suspend disbelief and move in that direction. And unfortunately, I think it's the same thing here, because there's always been these claims that the FBI and law enforcement is riddled with white supremacists and right-wing extremists. And if you were to challenge what happened on January 6th and said, wait a minute, I think there's more to this story as you peel the layers of the onion away, and there are things that might be, we might be able to look at and say it didn't happen that way, but we have a duty and an obligation to investigate it and to look into it and chase all these leads down. And for that, he was suspended.
But by doing this to Marcus Allen, what message is it sending to other FBI agents who maybe want to question authority?
A chill wind blows through, what we call the bullpen, which is where all the agents and task force officers work. Because when you see this, do you think the next time that something comes up where you go, hey, this doesn't seem right to me, it's not passing the smell test, do you think you're going to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm going to push back on this when you've seen what happened to him? Amy, the answer is hell no.
So you're in New York, and this is a federal investigation talking about Eric Adams' indictment, and he expects to be charged as early as today. That would make sense. This has been an investigation that's been ongoing for a while. He's had interaction with law enforcement that sought records and devices from him personally, in addition to a lot of staff members, and Wall Street Journal had a pretty good documentation on all the sort of corruption within his administration that has now reached the top of the food chain. But then you always have to look. This is New York. It's like Chicago. You always have to look at it through a bit of a jaundiced eye and through the politics of it, in terms of who gets targeted and who doesn't. And I see this rush to dump him by the AOCs of the world, and I wonder, did Eric Adams wear out his welcome with the sort of prevailing element within his own party, and this is an opportune way to move him out and move somebody that they're more comfortable with in?
Well, see, here in New York, Dan, what we do is we sit back and we look at Chicago's issues with the with the mayor's office, and we go, boy, we've got it good, even though we disagree with a lot of the things that Mayor Adams has done or hasn't done. Look, this is a federal case, and there's a reason why people typically cooperate with federal authorities, because the federal government has a 93 or 94, 95% conviction rate. If the feds are bringing a case, generally speaking, they've got the goods. And now look, when you say, hey, if you sense a little bit of smoke, there might be a fire. There is so much smoke going on around Eric Adams. And again, he's guilty of what many in politics are guilty of, and it's called cronyism. It's where you hire people who are not the best and the brightest, but are loyal sycophants or shills for you. And he did that. That's why there are so many. There's a list I can't even off the top of my head of like 9 or 10 of his closest associates that are either under indictment or resigned under investigation or are currently under investigation. Mm-hmm. And that includes somebody I know pretty well, the brand new NYPD police commissioner, who the feds just apparently investigated his office and his home for documents that might have been in his possession from 20 years ago. Now, those are not they're not synergistic. They have nothing to do with each other. However, it just goes to show the federal government is on the trail of Mayor Adams, and I don't think this is going to end well for him.
I suspect not. I mean, particularly this campaign finance. So there's a money trail here, and you're right. I mean, you point out in police, you've got 2 fire chiefs charged with accepting bribes in exchange for expediting safety inspections, a Department of Buildings guy, a deputy mayor, so on and so forth. So, I mean, it could just be that this is, beyond the pale even for New York City, which is sort of what happens in Chicago and Illinois. It's like, okay, this is beyond the pale in terms of your brazenness with the corruption that we've become accustomed to. And so then somebody usually goes down. But, and of course, public officials in New York go down all the time, like in Chicago. So, I don't want to make more of it than it is, but I just thought that politicians weighing in so quickly, I thought that was really odd. And of course, we've all watched, now this is state level, but still, we've all watched the conduct of Letitia James and Alvin Bragg, and we suspect that politics plays a big role in the prosecutorial discretion there in New York City.
Well, the worst thing, It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. If Mayor Adams is forced to resign, and the only way he can be removed, Governor Kathy Hochul, New York State governor, has the option to do that. But this is something where it's an internecine battle within the Democrat Party. And look, the Democrats run New York State. They have the Assembly, they have the Senate, and they have the State House, and it's a supermajority. Only she can remove him. If he stays on and is either indicted, he can still stay on. If he elects to resign, the person they would move into that place is a gentleman by the name of Jumaane Williams. And for your listeners that might not be familiar with him, he's the public advocate here, a big defund the police guy, big Black Lives Matter supporter, and someone that if you think New York City is going in a bad way right now, and you know how it works, right? Everybody votes with their feet. My village, a lot of people from New York City have moved here because of crime, because of the regulations, because of the inflation down there. If this happens, if people think that New York City is on a collision course with the death knell of failure as a major city, this would spell its demise.
Yeah, we're very familiar with that model here. James Gagliano, retired FBI supervisory special agent and a doctoral candidate in Homeland Security at St. John's. He's also the mayor of the village of Cornwall-on-Hudson in New York, and he's on the board of directors for the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. James Gagliano, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a great day, Dan and Amy.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hey, AM 560 homeowners.